This whole thing started about 8 months ago, and I still can't believe it actually happened to me. I'm Marcus. I work in construction, and I never thought I'd be the guy who falls for someone so completely different from my world. But here we are. It was a normal day at the Moore Heritage Hall, or so I thought. I had been working in the old ballroom for weeks, fixing up the rigging for a big event. I never expected that day to change everything. The sound that cable made when it snapped is something I'll never forget. It wasn't like metal breaking at all. It was sharp and sudden, like a gunshot in a quiet room. My body moved before my brain even caught up. I didn't yell because yelling wastes air. And in that moment, air was everything. I planted my feet, tightened my grip on the hydraulic jack, and leaned my entire shoulder into it. That jack was the only thing holding up the main support beam of this massive, old ballroom I was working in. "Don't move," I said. My voice came out way calmer than I felt. Everyone in the room just froze. Dust was hanging in the air like it was suspended in time. Above us, this enormous crystal chandelier started swaying, slow at first, then getting wider and wider. This thing was huge, probably weighed as much as a small car, and it was hanging directly over one person. Her name was Elena Moore. She was standing perfectly still with her eyes wide open, just staring up at the chandelier, swinging back and forth above her head. She didn't scream or run or anything. She just stood there, frozen in place, holding a clipboard like somehow that was going to protect her. Even in that crazy moment, I noticed she didn't panic like most people would. It was like she was thinking, calculating, trying to figure out what to do. "Marcus," she whispered, and her voice was shaking just enough for me to hear it. "I've got it," I said, pushing harder on the jack. My back felt like it was on fire. My arms felt like they were tearing apart. The steel groaned, and then slowly, I could feel the weight moving. The chandelier above us started swaying less and less, until it finally steadied. "3 steps back," I told her, "go slow." She did exactly what I said. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The second she was clear of the danger zone, I finally let myself breathe out. She leaned against a sawhorse with one hand pressed against her chest, trying to catch her breath. I locked the jack in place, wiped my hands on my work pants, and walked over to check on her. The air smelled like old plaster, hot metal, and something soft and expensive. Vanilla may be her perfume. "You need to evacuate this entire wing," I said. "I don't sugarcoat things ever. That cable is completely corroded. If I hadn't been testing the load right then, that chandelier would have come down on you." She looked up at me, her eyes dark and sharp. I could see fear in them, but also a calculating look like her brain was already working on a solution. "We have a Valentine's Gala in 6 weeks, she said. "The board is coming for a walkthrough in 2 days. If they see this, they'll condemn the building." I looked up at the rigging. It was old and beautiful but dangerous. "If they don't see it," I said, "someone gets killed." "I can't lose this place," she said quietly. Then she straightened her jacket like she was putting on armor. "Mr. Harrison is looking for any excuse to sell this land. Can you fix it?" Quote. I studied the cracked beam and the rusted anchors, then looked back at her. She was scared, but she wasn't backing down. "It's a heavy job," I said. "It'll be expensive, dirty, and we'll have to work nights so inspectors don't shut us down before we can get the permit secured." "I don't care about the hours," she said. "I'll be here with you." That was the moment everything changed for me. The Moore Heritage Hall was this old building from the early 20th century. Stone, oak, and money soaked into every single wall. My jobs are usually pretty simple. Move the heavy thing. Make it safe. Leave. I wasn't supposed to care about politics or drama, but the politics showed up the very next morning. Nathaniel Harrison was leaning against the reception desk when I arrived. Expensive suit, fake smile, gold watch that he kept tapping like he owned time itself. "Elena," he said in that sweet voice that made my skin crawl. "I heard there was an incident yesterday." I froze on the scaffolding above them, just listening. "Routine maintenance," Elena replied smoothly. "We're upgrading the suspension system." Harrison squinted up at me. "And this man is qualified to work on a historic trust property?" Quote, Mr. Reed is the best rigging specialist in the state, Elena said. His rates reflect that. Harrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just remember, one violation, one missed permit, and the board votes to liquidate. Don't let sentiment get in the way of profit. When he left, the air felt about 20 degrees colder. He knows, Elena said quietly. Someone is feeding him information. Then we give him nothing, I said, climbing down. I can brace the main beam from the inside. It'll be invisible from the floor, but I need the hall completely empty. Just you and me. She studied my hands. They were scarred, rough, and still had grease under the nails. Why me? She asked. I need someone I trust on the controls, I said. That was only part of the truth, though. She nodded slowly. Tonight. Midnight. Midnight in a ballroom feels wrong. The shadows stretch too far and the silence feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. We worked for hours that first night. Sweat soaked through my shirt. Elena rolled up her sleeves, and her hair started slipping loose from the perfect bun she always wore while she monitored the pressure gauges. She learned fast. I really liked that about her. When I climbed down after the first weld, my legs were shaking with exhaustion. She handed me a bottle of water, and our fingers brushed. I felt this spark run straight up my arm. You're good at this, she said. It's just physics, I replied. Gravity wants everything down. I convince it not to. She rubbed her temple, looking exhausted. I feel like gravity is winning lately. You're not hiding, I said. You're fighting. She looked at me like nobody had ever said that to her before. That night, when I told her to get some sleep and watched her walk away, I knew the job wasn't just about steel anymore. It was about her. And somehow, without meaning to, I had stepped into something that was already pulling at both of us harder than any cable or beam ever could. The next week just blurred together in this mix of dust, steel, and a quiet tension that never really left the room whenever we were together. We worked before sunrise and after midnight, always careful, always watching who came and went through the building. A fatigue has this way of stripping people down to their raw edges, you know. And I saw it happening to Elena more each day. That calm director face she wore in public would crack when nobody else was around. Her shoulders would sag when she thought I wasn't looking. Her hands would tremble when she thought the building might hear her doubts. I noticed everything about her by then. It was a Friday morning when I was under the stage reinforcing floor joists and heard raised voices above me. It's irresponsible, Elena, I heard Harrison snap. I froze, my chest tightening. The sound of his voice made something inside me shift. You're pouring money into this building like water, he continued, his voice cold. I could hear her walking fast in those high heels, probably pacing right over my head. We've got to be careful here, he said. This project is spiraling out of control. There's no way we can make it work. I clenched my jaw, gripping my wrench tight, but I didn't climb out just yet. Reed is getting it done. Elena shot back, her voice sharp and steady. I could hear the tension in her words. She was trying to stay calm, but it was cracking through. People are talking, Harrison pressed, lowering his voice to a whisper. You're here late. He's here late. My schedule is none of your business, Elena said, cutting him off. I could hear the anger in her voice now. It is when it affects the reputation of this institution, he said, his voice smooth like butter. We can't have the director playing house with the hired help. That did it for me. I crawled out from under the stage just as his footsteps retreated and a door slammed somewhere. Elena was standing center stage with her arms crossed tight, just staring at nothing. I could see how worn out she was, how much of it was showing now. I walked over to her quietly, not wanting to startle her. I can quit, I said, my voice low. She spun around, eyes wide. Don't you dare. I'm a liability to men like him, I said. I can just walk away from this and take another job. There's nothing stopping me. But you didn't, she said softly, her voice breaking a little. She looked at me, really looked at me. Then she added, that's what matters. I stepped closer, and we stood there in that ballroom for a moment, just the two of us, surrounded by all that unfinished work and broken systems. You're right, I said, my voice steady now. He's using me to get to you, you know that. She sighed and leaned against one of the nearby beams, still looking at me. I know, but I can't just sit back and let him win. I need you here with me, Marcus. You've proven you can fix this. Not just the building, everything. That was the moment everything shifted. It wasn't just about saving the hall anymore. It was about protecting what mattered most. Then I'm staying, I said, without a second thought. But we do this my way, no shortcuts. She nodded slowly, and we shared that moment in the quiet, our eyes locked, knowing what came next. It was all on us now. After that, we fell into something that felt almost domestic. I brought strong black coffee in a battered thermos every morning because I learned she hated it lukewarm. She started leaving wrapped sandwiches on my toolbox because she noticed I always forgot to eat when I was working. We didn't talk about it. We just did it. One night, a massive storm slammed against the stained glass windows. Rain was hammering the roof so hard that the lights kept flickering. I was standing by one of the windows, checking the tension in the cables, when she walked in, holding a stack of fabric swatches for the gala. At least the roof isn't leaking yet, she joked with a small smile. You're an optimist, I replied, my voice hoarse from the dry air. I'm a realist, she said, but there was something different in the way she looked at me, something softer, like the storm had cleared something between us. But I still believe some things are meant to last. She was sitting on the floor sorting through the fabrics, red velvet, white silk, hope laid out in neat little squares. My parents built this place together, she said softly, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I always wanted a partner, you know, someone who carries the heavy end. I smiled, looking at her, and said, I'm good at heavy lifting. She looked up at me, her eyes soft in the dim work lights. The space between us felt small now, like we had closed the distance without even realizing it. When I offered my hand to help her up, she took it. Neither of us let go right away. Her forehead rested against my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her carefully, like I was bracing something fragile but important. I'm tired of hiding how I feel, she whispered, so softly I almost couldn't hear it. Then don't, I told her. It's okay. We don't have to hide anymore. We stayed like that in that empty ballroom until the storm passed and the building settled around us. I didn't want to let her go, but eventually, we had to get back to work. The real disaster didn't come from the roof, though. It came 3 days later with a clipboard and a nervous-looking guy in a cheap suit. A new inspector showed up with Harrison right beside him, looking way too pleased with himself. The inspector slapped a red tag on the scaffolding and ordered an immediate shutdown. Unsafe wiring, unpermitted structural work. He said, reading from his clipboard. Serenity ran in, and I could see panic all over her face. You can't do this, she said, her voice trembling. The gala is in 2 weeks. Harrison's not done yet, I whispered, my jaw clenched tight. Safety first, Harrison said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Using unlicensed contractors is a serious issue. I knew something was wrong then. I went straight down to the basement, and when I saw the exposed wires, I knew. They were too clean, too fresh-looking. Someone had cut them on purpose. I documented everything with my phone, photos, tools that had been left behind, proof. When I laid it all out upstairs, Harrison's smile twitched for a second, but the damage was already done. He pushed for an emergency board vote to remove Elena and sell the building. 3 days, that was all she had. She stopped answering my messages after that. I sat in my truck across the street from the hall for hours, rain streaking down the windshield, knowing I could walk away. I could take another job, make more money, forget all of this. But I couldn't forget her face, the way she looked when she thought she was losing everything. So I stayed. The days after Harrison's attack on Elena felt like a blur of frustration and sleepless nights. I stayed up poring over blueprints and city records, looking for anything that could prove our work was legitimate, that Harrison had been lying all along. I wasn't about to let him win, and I wasn't about to let Elena lose everything she had worked so hard for. The storm outside had nothing on the one raging inside me. I didn't know how to give up on this, Not when I knew how much it meant to her, to the people who trusted her. And especially not when I had started to feel like I was part of that world now. I dug through every corner of the old building, checking every section, every beam, every piece of the rigging that we had worked on. I knew this building better than I knew myself by that point, and when the city inspector came to look over the safety violations, I had everything ready. But still, there was a sick feeling in my stomach. Elena stopped answering my calls for 2 days straight, and I knew it was because she didn't want to drag me into her mess anymore. She thought she was protecting me. But it hurt, because I was done hiding, done pretending like I didn't care. It wasn't just the building anymore. It was her. The night before the board meeting, I sat in the cab of my truck across the street from Moore Heritage Hall, the rain streaking down the windshield, my mind racing. Elena had stopped responding to my messages after the shutdown. I knew she was probably feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders, thinking she was losing control. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I kept thinking about her, the way she had stood by me, how she had trusted me, even when everything was falling apart. How her eyes had looked that night in the ballroom, when the storm raged outside and the chandelier above us threatened to fall. She hadn't flinched. She had just looked at me, as if the chaos around us didn't matter, because we had each other. That was when I realized it. I wasn't just fixing beams or hanging chandeliers anymore. I was building something real, something steady. I didn't want to walk away from that. Not ever. The morning of the board meeting arrived, and everything felt like it was about to explode. Harrison's accusations hung over us like a cloud, and the entire building felt heavy, like the weight of it was pressing down on everything. Elena had tried to stay calm, but I could see the cracks. I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hands shook when she held the paperwork. She was holding on, but just barely. The boardroom was cold and sterile. Harrison was already there, looking smug in his designer suit, the fake smile stretched across his face. But he wasn't the only one waiting for the showdown. I walked in with the city engineer right behind me, carrying a folder full of documents that would change everything. The room went completely silent as soon as I stepped inside, and I could feel every eye on me. The tension was thick enough to slice. But I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. I stood by the back wall, watching Elena at the podium, standing tall despite the storm inside her. She was composed, but I could see the weight in her shoulders. She looked down at the papers in her hands and then back up at the board members, her voice steady. "When this building was constructed, it was meant to last," she said, her eyes flicking to me for just a second. "And we've made sure it will last for generations to come. This isn't about sentiment. This is about preserving a legacy, about giving something back to the community." I could see the strength in her now, the calm confidence she had been hiding. It wasn't just the building she was protecting. It was everything she had poured herself into. She had become something so much stronger than the woman I first met. She wasn't just a director anymore. She was a force. The city engineer stepped forward, clearing his throat. "We've reviewed the permits, the work done, and the structural integrity of the building," he said, holding up a thick stack of paperwork. "Everything has been verified. The building is safe. The previous issues have been resolved." Harrison's face went pale, then dark red. His fake smile disappeared, replaced with a hard, angry expression. "This is a conflict of interest," he snapped, standing up from his seat. "You've compromised your position." Elena didn't flinch. She stood her ground. "Do you have proof of that?" she asked calmly, her voice cutting through his anger. Harrison opened his mouth to retort, but the city engineer cut him off, his voice firm. "The red tag comes down tonight," he said. "The building is cleared for use. There is no issue." The room was dead silent for a long moment. Harrison was seething, but there was nothing he could do. The board members shifted in their seats, and I could see the change in their expressions. The power had shifted. Elena had won. But Harrison wasn't finished yet. As he stormed out of the room, his last attempt to save face was to point a finger at us. "This isn't over," he muttered. "You'll regret this." The board chairwoman gave him a sharp look before turning to the rest of us. "Enough," she said, her voice sharp. The gala proceeds as planned. We'll revisit leadership at a later time. And just like that, it was done. Harrison was out of the picture, and Elena had secured her place. When the room emptied out, Elena turned to me. Her eyes were glassy with exhaustion, but she was smiling. The relief was visible on her face, and for the first time in days, she looked like she could breathe. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you I would," I said, my voice low. "I don't walk away when things get heavy." She laughed softly, then pressed her forehead against my chest, just like she had that first night when the storm raged outside. This time she didn't pull away, and I didn't want her to. "I'm glad you stayed," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You're the one thing I didn't want to lose." I wrapped my arms around her tightly, feeling the weight of everything fall away, even if just for a moment. The battle wasn't over, but for now, we had won. Together. The days leading up to the gala felt like a strange kind of calm after the storm. There was still work to be done, of course. We had to finish the last of the rigging, fix some final details, and make sure the building was in perfect shape for the big night. But now, it wasn't just about surviving the next challenge. It was about rebuilding everything we'd fought for, together. Elena was more confident than I had ever seen her. She walked through the halls with her head held high, no longer hiding, no longer letting anyone push her around. And me? I couldn't take my eyes off her. Not in a way that was just admiration. It was deeper than that. I saw the woman who had fought for this place, for everything she believed in, and I couldn't help but feel proud of her. Proud to be by her side. We had become a team, in every sense of the word. From long days on the scaffolding to late nights planning the gala, we were moving in sync. I learned to read her like a blueprint, when she was exhausted, when she needed space, and when she needed to talk. And she did the same with me. It was subtle, but there was something new between us, something that made everything else feel possible. One night, just a few days before the gala, we found ourselves alone in the ballroom again, taking one last look at the chandelier. The room was mostly empty, just the two of us, standing in the soft light of the overhead lamps. It had been a long day, and Elena was tired, but she still looked beautiful, even in the worn-out jacket she'd thrown on over her dress. I was standing on the floor, adjusting the tension in one of the cables, when she walked over to me, looking up at the chandelier. It was steady now, not swaying, not threatening to fall, like it had been when we first met. "It's holding," she said softly, her voice quiet, but full of relief. "It's actually holding." I nodded, feeling that sense of pride settle deep in my chest. "It's always going to hold," I said. "I promised you that, didn't I?" Quote. She smiled, her eyes meeting mine. "You did, and you kept your promise." I dropped the tool from my hand and stood up straight, stepping toward her. There was something in the air between us, something unspoken, but we didn't need to say anything more. We had been through too much together, and we both knew what was coming. Her hand reached for mine, and I didn't hesitate. I took it, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. She stepped closer to me, and for a moment, the world outside the building didn't matter. All that mattered was this moment, this space between us, and the quiet understanding that had grown between us over the last few weeks. "I don't want to let go," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "You won't have to," I said, my hand tightening around hers. "Not ever." She closed the distance between us, and for the first time we kissed. Not hurriedly or in secret, but openly, without any fear or hesitation. It was simple, but it was everything. The kiss wasn't about proving something to anyone else. It was about the truth that had been growing between us all along. When we finally pulled apart, Elena leaned against me, resting her head on my chest. The storm outside had finally passed. The building was safe, and I could feel that same steadiness I had promised her. The days leading up to the gala were busy, but different now. There was a new energy in the air. We worked together side by side, and the tension between us that had once been so thick was now a quiet hum. We still had to make sure everything was perfect for the night of the event, but now we did it with ease, with a shared sense of purpose. And when the night finally arrived, the hall was alive. The guests were pouring in, dressed to the nines, the chandeliers sparkling overhead. The building, the space that had once felt like it was on the brink of collapse, now felt like it was glowing with life. It was everything Elena had dreamed of, everything she had fought for, and I was right there beside her, watching her shine. I stood off to the side, trying not to feel completely out of place in my black shirt and jacket. Everyone else was in expensive suits and dresses, but I didn't care about that. All that mattered was Elena. She found me anyway. She always did. She walked over to me, her hand on my arm, like she was claiming me in front of everyone. I couldn't help but smile. She leaned in, her lips brushing against my ear. "You look good," she said with a grin. "Like you actually belong here." I chuckled, looking around at the fancy crowd. "I don't think I do." Quote, she squeezed my arm, her eyes twinkling. "Maybe not, but I do, and I'm choosing to be here with you." Her words struck me in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't just about being in the same space. It was about choosing each other. In front of all these people, she was choosing me. And in that moment, I realized how much I had already chosen her, without even realizing it. When she gave her speech later that night, it wasn't just about thanking donors or staff. It was about something deeper, something I hadn't expected. She spoke clearly and confidently, thanking everyone who had helped make the night a success. But when she turned to the crowd, her eyes found me. "The strongest things we build aren't always the prettiest," she said, her voice carrying over the room. "They're the ones that hold when the storm comes." And as the applause filled the room, I didn't hear much of it. I only heard her voice, and I only saw her looking at me, the woman who had fought for everything, who had stood by me through it all. After the speech, she stepped down from the stage and walked straight to me. She handed me a red rose, a simple gesture that meant everything. "To the heavy lifter," she said softly, her voice tender. I leaned in close, smiling. "Your contract still valid, right?" Quote. She laughed and nodded, a bright smile on her face, permanent. And then, when I kissed her, it wasn't rushed, it wasn't hidden. It was a simple, real kiss. A kiss that said everything we had both been holding back. It was ours, and no one else's. The days following the gala felt like a dream. Everything had gone off without a hitch. The hall was full of life, full of energy. The event had been a success, and the building was finally being appreciated for all its history and beauty, not for the drama that had nearly torn it down. But just when I thought we could breathe easy, life had a way of reminding us that it wasn't over yet. Elena was still working around the clock, overseeing everything from the gala's success to the future of the building. She was busy, and I could see the toll it was taking on her, but I also saw the change in her. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into that board meeting, uncertain and weighed down by expectations. No, this Elena was a fighter. She was confident, steady, and more sure of herself than I had ever seen. We still had our late nights in the ballroom, just the two of us, making sure everything was holding together. Sometimes we worked in silence, and sometimes we'd talk about everything and nothing, about the building, the past, the future. I learned more about her in those quiet hours than I ever could have during the chaos of the gala. But as much as I admired her strength, I could see how much she was carrying. How much she was still holding inside, pretending like it didn't bother her. I knew she was trying to protect me, to keep me from seeing just how hard it all was. But I wasn't blind. It was late one night when I noticed it again, the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes looked a little too tired. She was standing by the scaffolding, checking the cables I'd just reinforced, but she was doing it absent-mindedly, like she wasn't really seeing anything. She looked like she had 1,000 thoughts running through her head, but none of them were about the building. "Hey," I said quietly, walking over to her. "Talk to me." She stiffened for just a second before turning toward me. "I'm fine," she said, trying to brush it off with a weak smile. "No, you're not," I said gently, stepping closer to her. "What's going on?" Quote. She paused, her lips pressed tight together. For a long moment she didn't say anything, but I could see the struggle on her face. "It's just a lot," she finally admitted, her voice small. "The building, the board, Harrison, all of it. I feel like I'm fighting all the time, and I can't stop." Quote. I wanted to pull her into my arms right then and there, but I didn't. I stayed where I was, giving her space, letting her take her time. "I don't want to lose this place," she said, her voice shaking just slightly. "I don't want to lose everything my parents built. I don't want to let them down." I stepped closer and put a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "You're not alone in this anymore," I said softly. "You've never been alone in this. We're in this together, okay?" Quote. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe gratitude, maybe something deeper. But she didn't look away. Instead, she nodded, her gaze softening. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "You don't have to," I replied, my hand gently squeezing her shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere." She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, she was standing taller. More like the woman I had come to know. Strong, steady, and sure of herself. "You're right," she said, the fire returning to her eyes. "I can do this. We can do this." The next few weeks were a blur of work and determination. The pressure from Harrison had faded, but his shadow still loomed over us. He wasn't finished trying to tear the hall down. There were more whispers, more backroom deals, but none of it mattered. Elena didn't back down, and neither did I. We worked together, side by side, just like we always had, and each day we grew stronger. But it wasn't all work. As much as we were consumed by the building, we also found moments where we could just be us. Even after everything, we still found time for each other. It was late one night, after we had finished our shift, when I found Elena sitting on the stage, her legs dangling off the edge like she had a million things on her mind. I walked over to her, leaning against the nearby pillar, watching the way the light hit her face. "You know," I said, my voice playful, "you're not bad at this whole leadership thing." She smiled, but it wasn't her usual confident grin. "It's harder than I thought," she said. "I thought I had it all figured out. But the pressure, the decisions, it's not as easy as it looks." I walked over and sat next to her, my shoulder brushing hers. "You've handled it better than anyone could. And I think you're more than capable. You just needed someone to remind you." Quote. She laughed softly, looking down at the floor for a moment before meeting my eyes. "I think I needed you more than I wanted to admit," she said, her voice soft. "Good thing I'm not going anywhere," I said with a grin, nudging her playfully. She smiled, her eyes bright. "Good thing." And in that moment, with the sounds of the building around us, with everything we had fought for still hanging in the balance, I realized something. I didn't just want to be here for the building. I didn't just want to make sure the steel held, the beams stayed strong. I wanted to be here for her, because we had built something together, something stronger than anything I could have imagined, something worth fighting for. The next few months were filled with progress, not just for the building, but for everything Elena and I had worked so hard for. The hall was flourishing, drawing more attention than it ever had before. Donations started flowing in, and the gala's success had brought more respect to Elena than I ever thought possible. She wasn't just the director anymore. She was the woman who saved the hall, who fought for what mattered, and who proved that sometimes the people who seem the least likely to succeed are the ones who make the biggest difference. As for me, I kept working, doing what I loved, but it wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about what I was building with Elena, day by day. We had come a long way since the first time I'd seen her standing in the ballroom, the chandelier swaying above her head. The woman who had once seemed so untouchable had become my partner, my equal, and someone I couldn't imagine my life without. One evening, after a particularly long day of work, we stood in the empty ballroom, looking out at the glowing chandelier that had once nearly fallen. It was steady now, a symbol of everything we had been through together. The room was quiet, and the rest of the world seemed far away. "I think it's finally done," Elena said softly, her voice carrying in the stillness. She was looking up at the chandelier, but her hand was in mine, and I could feel the weight of everything we had built together. "It's always been done," I replied, my voice low, steady. "We just had to believe it." Quote. She smiled at me, her eyes filled with something warm, something real. "I didn't know I could trust someone like this," she said, almost to herself. "Not just with the building, but with everything, with my heart." I took a step closer to her, feeling the pull between us. "You should have trusted me sooner," I said, my hand gently resting on her cheek. "I'm not going anywhere." Her smile softened, and she reached up, touching my face, tracing the lines of my jaw like she was memorizing me. "I know," she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." For a moment we stood there, the sound of our breathing, the only noise in the room. The weight of everything, the fights, the struggles, the doubts, had lifted, and in its place there was peace. There was us. "I've been thinking about something," she said, her voice suddenly quieter, more serious. I raised an eyebrow, a smile tugging at my lips. "What's that?" Quote. She stepped closer, her body just inches from mine. "About what comes next. About the future. I want you to be a part of it. I don't want to do this without you." I didn't need to ask what she meant. I already knew. I had known for a long time. "I'm in," I said without hesitation. "For the future. For whatever comes." Her eyes searched mine for a moment, and then she leaned in, her lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was slow, deliberate, and full of everything we had fought for. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. A promise that we had built something unshakable together, something that could withstand anything. When we finally pulled apart, she smiled, and I felt something in my chest tighten. "So," she said, her voice lighter now, "when are you going to officially make this place yours?" Quote. I grinned, knowing exactly what she meant. "I think I've already done that." She laughed, and it felt like the first time I'd heard her laugh without the weight of the world on her shoulders. She leaned in again, kissing me once more, and I knew this was where I belonged. Not just in the building, not just in the work, but in the life we were building together. Months passed, and things settled into a rhythm. Elena's leadership at the hall became more respected than ever, and she was the one everyone turned to when things got tough. She was unstoppable now. As for me, I continued to work on the building, but I also found myself more and more present in her life, in our life. We took the time to enjoy the moments that mattered, the quiet ones between the chaos. I started to realize something about what I had with Elena. It wasn't just about the building or the work. It was about the trust we had built, the way we leaned on each other, shared the weight of everything, and made each other stronger. Together, we were unstoppable. One afternoon, as we walked through the hall, her hand in mine, I realized that this wasn't just a building we had saved. It was our lives. It was the love that had grown between us in the quiet moments, in the hard times, in the nights when we thought we couldn't make it, and yet here we were, standing tall, stronger than ever. "We've built something incredible," she said, looking around at the hall. "Yeah," I agreed, my eyes on her. "We did." She stopped walking and turned to face me, her eyes serious now, her voice full of warmth. "I couldn't have done it without you." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We did it together." And in that moment, with the chandelier above us and everything we had fought for around us, I knew that this, us, was the one thing I would never take for granted. No matter what came next, we had each other. And that was more than enough. The years passed, and life continued. The hall thrived, and Elena's vision for it flourished. We kept working, side by side, building more than just a structure. We built a future. And I couldn't imagine it with anyone else but her. Every night, when the lights dimmed and the last of the guests had left, we'd walk through the ballroom together, hand in hand. The chandelier above us was steady, just like us. And no matter what storms came our way, I knew we had built something that could withstand anything. We had built something strong enough to last. Together.